Hello everyone, my name's Anitsu and I'm back with another Digimon video. So today I'm going to be doing a set review, and it's not just going to be of any set review, this is going to be of BT13, slated to release on July 21st of 2023. So as I did with my other set review, I'm not necessarily going to go too in-depth over individual cards because the individual cards aren't designed in a vacuum and they're designed with a specific pair of cards in mind to try to flesh out the capabilities of what that card is trying to do. So this is going to be more of a brief overview rather than an in-depth look into every individual card of BT13. That being said, BT13 still offers us a lot of really new and exciting things to look forward to. So as far as what's in BT13, so out of BT13, it's going to be a normal BT set, so pull rates are going to be expected to be the same as almost every other BT set before it. So BT13, the main theme of the set is centered around Data Squad or Savers or Season 5 of the anime. The 13 Royal Knights and the Season 5 incarnation of those Royal Knights is going to be premiered along with King Drazel or Yggdrasil as the sub-theme of the set. So the set has a lot of new cards to be able to make some new decks out of, including the 13 Royal Knights deck, and it also starts some other decks. Most of them are going to be on the casual side at best, but the set also offers a lot of support for a lot of older decks, which is really good, so that way we have a lot of new tech and tools to play with for a wide variety of people on those different decks. Then on top of that, it's going to be introducing some new mechanics inside of the set, including the barrier and burst evolution mechanics, and the box topper promos that are going to be coming along with it will also make an appearance in the set as well. So as far as what that mechanic is that we're getting these box topper promos of, it is going to be the ace mechanic. And considering these cards are coming out before their respective starter decks and sets, are these going to be legal for competitive BT13? And we just got confirmation that yes, they are indeed legal for BT13. So when it comes to the new mechanics found on these cards, it is going to be the Ace, Overflow, and Blast Evolution mechanic. So Ace and Overflow kind of are married just because it is the type of card that it is. Ace cards usually have a lower play cost, making them easier to get out, which seems to be the goal and intention of how to utilize aces, on top of the fact that they're usually going to be paired up with the Blast Digivolution mechanic, again, to try to get these cards to be able to be played as easily and effectively as they possibly can. So when it comes to the Overflow mechanic, it states that whenever this card is sent from the battle area or under your cards to another place, you'll be losing X memory. So that's kind of the push and pull of the card's mechanic, is the fact that you get a really cheap body out, but when it eventually leaves, then you're going to be giving the opponent a lot of extra memory to be working with. Then the Ace is going to be usually paired up with the Blast Digivolution mechanic, as I stated before, to try to make it easier to digivolve into your Digimon, because with Blast Evolution, you may digivolve into this Digimon without paying its cost. So that's really powerful, and that's why it needs the Overflow mechanic to kind of accompany with it, so the cost is more backloaded rather than front-loaded. And then Blasted Digivolution is going to be paired up with the hand and counter mechanics as the way to be able to get out your Blast Digivolution. So Blast Evolution does, with the hand and counter mechanic, come with a new timing window in terms of adding a new layer and dynamic to the game on how we could utilize our cards. So this new timing window is not necessarily super hard to understand. It occurs after all of the when attacking triggers are done on the opponent's side and before blockers are being able to be declared, so that way you could Blast Evolve into a blocker and be able to block with that Digimon. So that's just a really interesting way to have some more counterplay, and even though it is a telegraphed move, it does come with a lot of high risk and high reward. Then because of this, it's going to be adding more complexity to the game, and it's going to be a big meta changer for BT13 for the decks that can incorporate these cards. Then, as far as the other mechanics actually found within inside of the set, we have the barrier mechanic. So the barrier mechanic isn't really found on a whole lot of cards just yet, but I feel like they're going to start leaning yellow more towards the utilization of this barrier mechanic. So what is barrier actually doing is when this Digimon is going to be deleted by battle, you could trash the top card of your security stack to prevent that deletion. Note this is just on battle, it's not on anything else, so they can still use effects to remove the card, and barrier won't be able to protect you. But this does still allow yellow to have some form of protection, because previously it doesn't have a whole lot of forms of protection, and it still adds security manipulation into what yellow is trying to do. So I think that it's going to be a really interesting mechanic to see how they're going to be incorporating it moving forward. But as of right now, it's mainly going to be used inside of the Bancho Leomon and Kentoros deck. And then the other big mechanic that we're going to be seeing inside of BT13 is going to be Burst Digivolution. So Burst Digivolution states that you can Digivolve for 0 on top of your base Digimon by returning one of the designated tamers in play to your hand, and at the end of the turn, you get to trash the top card of this Digimon, basically de-Digivolving it back down into that level 6. So this new mechanic is designed to try to give a good temporary boost to make more powerful plays possible, and right now this is designed around the protagonist's Digimon, and I do know that there's some more burst mode Digimon that they haven't used, so they can always go back and revisit this mechanic and utilize it elsewhere with other Digimon. So as far as the brand new decks coming out of BT13, well, we don't really have that many brand new decks coming out of BT13, and it's doing a lot to upgrade a lot of various other decks that we already had. So as far as the new decks that are coming out within BT13, we have the 13 Royal Knights, we have the Kentorosmon deck, we have the Chessmon deck found in yellow and black, we have Purple Belphemon, and we have the Green Leopardmon deck that seems to want to be centered around beasts. And then as far as the decks that BT13 is actually upgrading, well, there is a slew of different decks that get some form of update, either a 1-2 card update or a meaningful new evolutionary line that's going to help flesh the decks out. So when it comes to the red cards in the set, we have 4 decks that it's trying to update. We have Shine Greymon, Jessmon, Vaccine Birds, and Gallantmon. So as far as the egg goes, it is going to try to support Vaccine Birds, utilizing on-delete effects. And that trend is what Vaccine Birds started in BT11, and that's going to be still true here, with the new Biomon also having an on-delete effect, Aquilamon also having an on-delete effect, same with the new Garudamon. But the main intention of these new cards is to try to interact with the new Tamer, and the new Tamer is still trying to play around with birds and avians, which is what Biomon was trying to do, again, all the way back in BT11. So the new combo is to try to play Biomon off of a card effect, then use the fact that we played Biomon off of a card effect to bounce Christie back to our hand to be able to Digivolve into Garudamon, so that way we could easily climb all the way up into a new level 5, and then our level 5 is going to then be able to either A, replay our Christie, or B, play the Tamer that came out with BT11 to try to, again, further incentivize us for utilizing our birds and our avians. And then when it comes to the big update that a lot of people were waiting for, that's going to be the update to the Shine Greymon deck. So the Shine Greymon deck, it does get a whole new evolutionary line in this set, and it's going to flesh out what it was trying to do from BT12 and EX4, which is centered around utilizing your Marcus Tamer, and have your Marcus Tamer actually be somewhat threatening, being a card that actually could attack. So you have the Agumon that's able to turn your other Marcus into a Digimon, which is pretty good. So that way you have two different ways on being able to utilize your Marcus and still gain full benefit off of your cards, because a lot of the deck is also centered around when your Tamer becomes suspended. The deck does have a lot of decent control type elements into it, with a lot of DP reduction, which is playing more off of the yellowness, and it also still has some other yellow mechanics like recovery built into it, on top of just more fluidity, thanks to the fact that we have 3 different evolutionary lines that's utilizing Dinosaur Agumons and Geo Greymons to try to make our cards as effective as we possibly can, while again still synergizing and supporting our Marcus Tamer. Then we do have a new Shine Greymon. This isn't going to be better, and this isn't going to be your main level 6 when it comes to your Shine Greymon deck, but this is still just a really good complementary card, allowing your Marcus to try to be as powerful as it possibly can be, while still having a cheap Shine Greymon for you to use in the deck to try to best support it for utilizing Shine Greymon Burst Mode, which is the main pull and big powerhouse card of the deck, especially in combination with BT12 Marcus, to be able to line up some really powerful attacks. And then when it comes to the updates to Jesmon, we do have a whole new evolutionary line for us to be playing with. So the gimmick behind this new evolutionary line is to try to Digivolve by playing our Sistermons. So the Huckmon for playing our Sistermon wants us and lets us Digivolve into our Bauhuck. Then if we play another Sistermon in our Bauhuck, we get to reduce the Digivolution and Digivolve into our Savior Huck. And then the effects will also gain us some good passive memory to try to make our cards as cheap and effective as we can possibly make them. But going up into our Savior Huck, if we play another Sistermon, that allows us to Digivolve cheaper into our Jesmon, so that way we could try to gain as much benefits off of our Jesmons as we possibly can. And then we also, to accommodate this brand new Jesmon, have a brand new Genkumon that we could incorporate into the deck. They're both, again, still just trying to play around with our Sistermons, but they also are really good cards to try to help support the 13 Royal Knights deck as well, which is going to be the sentiment with a lot of the Royal Knights, is the fact that they do have this on play ability, while still trying to be able to set up its previous iteration and incarnation of the deck. And then that sentiment is still true with the updates to Gallantmon, which is literally just one card, but this new Gallantmon is just a really good card, not only just making it easier for us to reduce his play cost for doing what Gallantmon wants to do and for what the Royal Knights deck wants to do, but the fact that he has 3 different ways to be able to trigger his ability, and all 3 of them are not limited to once per turn, so you can get multiple of these off depending on how you're utilizing this card, and the fact that he natively has Rush just makes him even more accessible in order to utilize these abilities as best as we possibly can to try to control the opponent's field. And then when it comes to the blue cards of the set, we do have a brand new egg that seems to be wanting to play around with what Homer's Digimon is trying to do, which is interact with the fact that it's trying to have blockers and separate its inheritable sources. But I think that because the line isn't necessarily fully fleshed out, even though we do have one line, that's not necessarily enough to make a deck out of, and this is just going to be better used to try to support the Aegistramon deck. And some of these cards, like the new Kamemon, also could go inside of Aegistramon as well, even though it's not necessarily part of the subtypes that Aegistramon is trying to be playing around with, so there is a little bit of anti-synergy there. It's still just a decently good generic level 3 Digimon for us to use, same with the level 4, but once we get any higher, that's when things kind of get muddled because it's not fitting on brand and on theme anymore with what Aegistramon is trying to do, and same with the level 6, and it's clear that they want to try to be their own deck, but I'm not necessarily confident enough in these cards' abilities to make a deck out of, and they're not necessarily going to see a whole lot of use at all, and instead you're probably just going to use the egg and the tamer to support what Aegistramon is trying to do, with being able to split apart your inheritable abilities during the opponent's turn, and be able to restack your Digimon to have inheritable abilities to be able to split it apart later to get various different on-play effects off, and the tamer helps accomplish that goal quite nicely. Then when it comes to some of the other decks that blue is trying to support, we do have a new line of Jellymon cards, but Jellymon isn't necessarily going to be that great of a deck yet until we hit RB1, where the majority of the support is going to be, and further fleshing out all of the different tools that Jellymon has. And these kind of tools that Jellymon got in BT13 are a little bit on the awkward side to use, just because they're trying to trash the opponent's inheritables, which isn't necessarily the game plan on what Jellymon was before, and Jellymon more so was about drawing and being able to discard cards from your hand to be able to do various different benefits. But if you are looking to build Jellymon, I do think the Tethysmon is actually a really good card to use to be able to have a interesting way to warp it into your higher stage Digimon and get into your higher stages as quickly as you possibly can, while still fitting more on brand with what Jellymon has been trying to do beforehand. Then when it comes to the big one-card update, we do have a new version of Ulforce. I don't necessarily think that the Ulforce deck is really going to want to try to utilize this card, and this is more so for the Royal Knights deck, but the fact that he is a Ulforce that we could think about utilizing adds some tech and tools that we could use for the deck depending on where the meta goes. But the big draw and the big support of the set is going to be for the Gaomon deck. So the Gao deck is all about trying to fill up the opponent's hand and have the opponent have as many cards in their hand as they possibly can, so we could take benefit and advantage of them having a large hand size. And his new evolutionary line in BT13 is doing all of that quite nicely, while still interacting with our main tamer, which is going to be Thomas, and giving us another Thomas for us to use. But this new evolutionary line, it just helps, again, complete what the deck was trying to do from BT11 and EX4, while adding some extra new tech and tools into the deck, utilizing the new Mirage Gao. I don't necessarily think, like Shine Greymon, this is going to be the primary Mirage Gao, but it's still not a bad card to use for the deck as the supporting level 6, and it's a cheap level 6, again, for us to use if we don't have one, to be able to incorporate Mirage Gaogamon Burst Mode into the deck, and I think all of these Burst Mode cards want to be used in some combo to be able to do a lot of potential damage against the opponent and control them in various different ways. And like in Shine Greymon, the new Tamer and new option also are just helping the deck out for doing what the deck wants to do. And then when it comes to the yellow cards of the set, we do have a little bit of overlap with one of the decks that it's trying to support and to make, which is going to be the Chessmon deck. So you have the yellow side, which is utilizing the white Chessmons, and then you have the black side, which is using the, well, black Chessmons. And they want to support each other as best and cleanly as we possibly can, because a lot of the white Chessmons have the reboot ability, and a lot of the black Chessmons have the blocker ability, so we could try to crisscross our evolutions to try to have reboot blockers. And the whole goal and theme of the deck is to basically just try to have a board presence at all times, just because a lot of our Digimon will have an on-delete ability to try to play out another Chessmon, going all the way up to our higher stages, and then we have the King and the Queen that are trying to support the rest of our Chessmons and make them as strong and playable as we possibly can, and the Queen is obviously going to be a little bit better than the King, but they both have their roles, and the fact that we have two evolutionary lines means that we could build the majority of the deck just out of these cards and then put whatever filler cards we want to subsidize it with based on if we want to play a yellow support or a black support. And we even have a fantastic tamer that's helping support the idea on not only just playing our Chessmons, but two-color Digimon in general. And then as far as the big one-card update that we got for Armor Rush, it's going to be Magnamon. So this obviously wants to be played more so inside of the 13 Royal Knights deck, but it still has a home inside of Armor Rush as well, being another Magnamon that we have access to, and a good cheap replacement if you didn't have access to Magnamon already. But the main deck that yellow seems to want to be supporting is going to be focused around the Kintaros and Bancho Leomon deck, just because both of those two evolutionary lines make up the majority of the deck. We're going to be wanting to use a couple of cards to help flesh it out and round out that deck, and that deck is all about security manipulation on trying to be within 6 security between you and your opponent, and it has effects and benefits that reward us for removing our own security when we're triggering abilities like the barrier ability. So we do have a really good searcher with Kudamon to help start the engine going, on top of the fact that his evolutionary line is still just pretty good at trying to stall out the opponent and utilize our security as a secondary resource. So that way when we go up into our higher stage Digimon, we're going to have some form of protection and possibly some form of replacement when our Digimon gets deleted and our Digimon is trying to be as powerful and effective as it's trying to be, with Kintarosmon acting like a better version of BT4 War Greymon to try to put some aggression and pressure on, while again being another Royal Knight for us to play inside of the 13 Royal Knights deck. Then, when it comes to the Bancho line, the majority of the Bancho cards are just trying to support what Kintarosmon is doing in terms of the idea on trying to remove cards from your security and try to manage both players' security at the same time, wanting us to be in that particular threshold of both of our securities being at 6 or less, while also having the other half of the protection that we're going to be having, so our cards can try to be as aggressive as we possibly can. And if Kintarosmon is going to be the sword of the deck, then Bancho Leomon is going to be that shield, with the Tamers trying to help and support what each of their respective megas are going to do, with Spencer being the one that's a little bit more generic, and an option to even go with the deck to try to help round itself out. And then, as far as what Green is trying to do, there's 4 decks that Green is trying to update. It's trying to update Plants, Fairies, and Vegetations. It's trying to let you build a Leopardmon deck. It's trying to update the Angoramon deck and the Examon deck. So Examon is going to be the green big 1-card update. I don't necessarily think the Examon deck as a whole realistically needs this card, but it's a really good budget alternative in case you don't have the EX3 version, so that way the deck is more accessible, and it's still a very decent card inside of that deck. Then it also wants to be played inside of that 13 Royal Knights deck. I also don't think this is the best card for that deck, but it's still there as an option for you to think about nonetheless. Then, as far as the big deck that Green is wanting to push you towards, is going to be an updated version of Plants, Fairies, and Vegetations, more focused and centered around Rosemon, but you could still utilize some of these parts and pieces inside of Bloom Lordmon as well, because he's playing with those same subtypes. The only difference is that Plants, Fairies, and Vegetations with Rosemon is not necessarily trying to suspend your own Digimon down, but try to suspend the opponent's Digimon and the opponent's Tamers, and to be able to try to keep them locked down. Lalamon as just a good generic searcher for Plants, Fairies, and Vegetations. Yoshino, being the main Tamer, also is just a good generic card for Plants, Fairies, and Vegetations, with some good passive memory gain, while also being a good memory fixer. But when it comes to the higher stages, with the utilization of Rosemon, because Rosemon is going to be the card that's going to try to help suspend the opponent's Digimon down and Tamers and keep them locked down, with Rosemon Burst Mode being the big damage dealer for the deck, really rewarding you for suspending a lot of the opponent's Digimon and Tamers down. Then, when it comes to the Angora update, this is kind of like Jellymon, where it's not necessarily a finished and complete deck. You could still build something and still play with it, but we're waiting for RB1 to be able to complete the deck. But at least the big difference between Angoramon and Jellymon is Angoramon is fitting more on theme with what he was trying to do, at trying to suspend the opponent's Digimon down and gain benefits for beating them up and keeping their field clear of having Digimon. And with the level 4 and even the level 5, you could kind of see that the deck wants to support that, while the level 5, like Tesla Jellymon, being the big reward for utilizing his more inline cards and inline synergies. And then the Leopardmon deck, which seems to want to be more focused and centered around beasts, animals, and sovereigns, other than sea animals, of course, while also having some slight interaction with Royal Knights because Leopardmon is going to be the big mega for the deck, being a Royal Knight. So Salamon is going to be the Searcher. Then you have Mikemon being a good card for Leopardmon, so that way you could try to have access at Piercing, at beating up the opponent's Digimon, which is one of the main goals of the deck, is like Angoramon, suspend the opponent's Digimon down and be able to beat them up. And we see that this kind of a game plan is supported with having multiple different ways at not only just playing your Digimon and gaining good benefits from their abilities, but having good ways at trying to suspend the opponent's Digimon, with the Leopardmon being a good payout card for fitting inside of the Royal Knights deck as well, having more specific Royal Knights synergy on top of Green Digimon synergy, and we even have Leopardmon Leopard mode that's more directly supporting this type of a deck rather than the Royal Knights deck. And then when it comes to black, outside of the Chessmon cards that I've already showed off with the yellow cards, it's really just trying to update a lot of current and existing decks. So we have updates to Alphamon, Craniumon, more specifically black blockers. Then we have updates to Sukamon and even Mamemon as well. Mamemon is going to be the one card update with Prince Mamemon helping flood and spam the field while also giving your Mamemons some nice passive benefits of having jamming and reboot to try to make them as aggressive and annoying as we could possibly make them, while also having some slight Royal Knight synergy as well, just because black has some pretty good Royal Knights that you could play in the top end also. Then, speaking of our Black Royal Knights, we do have two Black Royal Knights that are going to want to go inside of the Royal Knight deck, but also update their own respective decks as well. Alphamon is going to be a little bit more stand out, just because the Alphamon deck before was pretty solid, even with the nerf and limitation, and this is just helping continue that style of gameplay at trying to disrupt the opponent and keep a body on board so you could end up going into your Oryuken. But when it comes to some of the other cards inside of the Alphamon line, it's not specifically just for Alphamon and Black X antibodies, but we could also use this with the Dex line as well, just because we did get that nerf and limitation to Doru Greymon, and we actually do have a really good replacement to that, so it adds some fluidity back into the Dex deck as well. On top of the fact that the rest of the line is just doing some really basic things, just giving some nice boosts to your Digimon to try to make them a little bit stronger and as annoying as you possibly can, with having another really good generic Black Digitama that's acting as a really good draw engine, so this is going to be one of the better Black eggs going forward, as long as you're able and wanting to have a good stack going. Then when it comes to Craniumon, he is trying to support his own Black Blockers deck. Black Blockers hasn't really been a deck for a while, and I don't necessarily think this whole new evolutionary line is going to be changing or fixing that, so this is mostly a card to just go into that 13 Royal Knights deck to act as a good defensive card. But the fact that he does actually have a line is really interesting for us to even think about trying to bring back Black Blockers in case you're that type of a player that just likes the blocker ability, just because there is still a lot of blocker synergy that black has to be playing around with. And then when it comes to the Sukamon deck, it seems like this new evolutionary line wants you to play more in line with Sukamon and Edamon synergy more specifically. And I think that just having all of these new Sukamon tools just helps flesh and round out that deck, but that deck was a meme and it didn't really do much, and it's not positioned to do much, but it's nice to see that they're at least updating it and allowing it to have more of a flood the field type of strategy, incorporating some of these new cards, so that way you could try to utilize some of their abilities alternatively instead of just focusing on trying to turn your opponent's Digimon into a Sukamon. These cards are a little bit more independent in terms of how they want to be utilized and the synergy that they're playing around with your Edamons and Sukamons. Purple is in a really interesting spot compared to the other colors because there's only two decks that it's actually wanting to play around with. The main deck that it's actually trying to play around with is going to be the Belphramon, having two evolutionary lines for us to utilize. Granted, the Gizumon is less of an evolutionary line and more of just an awkward way to climb your stages because of the type of on-delete synergy that it's playing around with. And then the Tamer is also going to help support the fact that we want to utilize our Gizumons and our Belphramon, with Belphramon's inline evolutionary line utilizing Pascomon and Porcupamon and Ostamon, with the way that it wants to fill up the trash, trying to be discarding. So you're going to be utilizing, if you want to help flesh out the deck, a lot of draw and discard based synergies, so that way you could try to make the most out of your card effects as you possibly can, with Belphramon being an absolutely insane card to try to sit on and stay on, just because Sleep Mode is going to basically be the defensive backbone, where the opponent really doesn't have a whole lot of ways to be able to remove them from the field, and then you're going to switch into Rage Mode and deal the majority of the damage and be the big offensive pushes outside of some good passive chips. And then you're just going to try to get up into those two and swap in between those modes when you need to. Then when it comes to the second deck that Purple is trying to play around with, it's going to be an updated version of Falcomon, just because we got a start of Falcomon in EX4, and now we get to help finish the deck and flesh it out with BT13, adding a whole new evolutionary line for us to be playing around with. That's still fitting on theme with the deck, on us trying to delete our Digimon once we're in a high stage and be able to replay our Digimon and gain a whole bunch of on-delete effects to try to control and manipulate the opponent's hand, with a couple of different other abilities to further round out what the deck is trying to do and what it's potentially capable of. And the fact that we do have some very similar style of effects just adds some cohesion to what the deck was trying to do between its level 5 and its level 6. I think that the old Ravemon from EX4 is, again, going to be the primary level 6 you want to use, but the fact that, like the others, we do have this budget version that's still going to be a good supporting mega and is still going to be a good card to include in the deck, just helps the deck out nonetheless, with the Burst Mode being the big combo card, and people do like these Digimon and potential playstyles. Then when it comes to the big outliers that Purple has, we have two Royal Knights in Purple for us to be playing with. They mostly, again, want to fit inside of that 13 Royal Knights deck, but they also want to play and interact with Lucemon. Lucemon hasn't really had a deck, and he's slowly getting parts and pieces for us to try to make a two-color yellow and purple deck, but I don't think it's exactly quite there, so it's making Dynasmon and Lord Nightmon look a little bit awkward in trying to build a Lucemon deck. But if you want to try to build a Lucemon deck, again, we're slowly getting parts and pieces to be able to do so, and it might be really fun and interesting to think how we can incorporate Lucemon into a deck, utilizing not only just the new Lord Nightmon and Dynasmon, but the old ones potentially as well, just because we do have a decent amount of yellow-purple synergies. And there's not really a whole lot to say in white, outside of the fact that white is just trying to support King Drazel and the 13 Royal Knights deck. And then as far as my overall thoughts on the set, I'm really happy about the set and the direction that it headed, as it's not only just thematically pretty fun and interesting, but all of the decks that are playable and all of the decks that it's updating definitely is nice to see a lot of love and care put into that set to try to make it as expansive for a wide amount of players as they possibly can. When it comes to the more competitive aspect, I think that the big winners competitively are going to be the Royal Knights deck, Shine Greymon, Mirage Galgamon, and Belphramon as the four most powerful and competitive decks to come out of the set and get some updates. When it comes to the Royal Knights deck more specifically, I think that deck is going to be a really expensive deck because you need two different sets of secret rares, and secret rares are already pretty expensive on a base level, and the more playable a secret rare is, then the higher the price tag it's generally going to hold. So the Royal Knights deck while it's cool that it is a self-inclusive deck inside of the set, it's going to be a really expensive one to be able to make and play. I do like the fact that they are deciding to utilize the ace cards and they're legalizing them, and I think that it will actually impact the meta quite a lot for the decks that can actively take advantage of them. And I really do wish that we did have the reprint set before BT13, like in Japan, so the Ghost Game cards don't necessarily feel out of place and left out in the meta. But that's the next set that's going to be coming out for us, so it's not like it's that big of a deal. It does just change what's playable and when it's playable. But I do think that overall it's going to be a really fun and interesting set, and it's nice to see how well designed this set is, and I'm really excited to see how the meta is going to shape up as a result. So that's all I really have for this video. As always, feel free to tell me your thoughts down in the comments below, and down in the description below are a couple of different ways you could support me and the channel. So I do have a TCG Player affiliate link, so when you use that link to buy cards off of TCG Player, then some of that money will go to supporting me and the channel. I also do make and sell playmats over on Overcard Gamers on Facebook, so when you buy a playmat with my design, then some of that money will also go to help supporting me and the channel. And on top of all of that, I do have a Twitch account over on twitch.tv/Zenitsu, so giving me a follow and a subscription also helps support me there, and I do play Digimon on top of various other games on that platform as well. So thank you everyone for watching, and as always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content, and I'll see you in the next video.